from the wastelands of the internet. I have returned. And today is a little ad hoc, I have ad hoc rant more than anything else. I want to yell at some clouds. There's some clouds around me. I feel the need to be lectured to. All right. So what has set me off? I can hear now. No man. You're angry at everything. You're always mad at things. Well, there's some truth to that. There is some definite truth to that. But what am I going to rant about? I am going to rant because I was on Twitter. Excuse me, X. I was on X. And I need to stay off X for my own sanity. But I was on X. And I was commenting. And I was commenting to the hoi polloi that I found. And I got into a discussion. Imagine that. But the rant has to do with schools. Public schools. Public schools here in Arizona. Where I got into a chat with an individual who was trying to defend public schools here in Arizona, specifically about how we're going to lose out on some funding because Tom Horn says, and he's one of the guys in charge of this crap, we don't need to do things that are required to get this federal grant of money. What's so funny, you yell at clowns? Public schools. Right? First of all, here in my state, we are ranked, depending upon which one you're looking at. Arizona has consistently been ranked 48th or 49th for our public schools and outcomes. Okay? It has been a major, major problem. And we keep throwing money at it. And that's the problem. We keep throwing money at these things, and nothing ever freaking changes. So, I basically went off. And I basically went off because I am sick and tired of seeing people throw money at things. And there's no result change. You want to put together a program that's going to cost XYZ money. Don't care. Okay? Show me that it works. Or stop it. Stop funding it. It's just that friggin' simple. Now, with the schools here in Arizona, they were an absolute disaster. And they've been an absolute disaster, and they're going to be an absolute disaster because there's no intention of reining in the problem. There's no one here willing to sit up there and talk about what the frickin' problem actually is. And the problem is the teachers, not the funding. I tried to explain to this person who I was having a chat with that this whole COVID bullshit, right, where that's what this grant is supposed to be used for, is to recoup supposed losses from the COVID nonsense. COVID nonsense, schools are freaking closed. What extra funding did the schools need? And the person came back with, and this is legitimate until you think about it, which was specifically, this person came back with, well, what about the laptops? Those laptops sent the schools back, blah, blah, blah. Well, really? All right. Well, first of all, with 4,000 students in this area, right, getting each one of them a laptop, something that wasn't necessary, but getting each one of the laptop from the school cost what? How much were those laptops? Remember, there's only 4,000 of them. How much were those laptops? How much did the schools purchase those laptops for 4,000 students now. 4,000 laptops. And these were not high-end laptops, folks, to start with. Okay, we're not talking $3,000, $4,000 laptops. We're talking things that were around $200 to $300 a laptop. That's all they were. So you're talking about 1.8 to approximately $3 million in total, all right, for those laptops. Now that seems to be quite a bit of money. A lot of people will be like, "Whoa, that's quite an outlay. That's quite an outlay." But they were already giving funds for that from the federal government to cover those costs. In fact, how many people have looked at their cell phone bills in detail, and you'll notice there's a charge on all of your cell phone coverage for putting schools and wiring schools and having all the schools placed online. Now, all the schools being placed online took place over a decade ago. And yet that charge on all cell phones that's being collected by the federal government is still there. So the infrastructure that this was supposed to pay for has already been accomplished. So money that was let out to these schools and given to these schools extra from the federal government with extra funds easily covered the cost of these laptops here in my area. So it wasn't an additional outlay that needs to be recouped. Now, this person I was chatting with was reasonable, attempted to stay reasonable. Nothing but kudos for how this person interacted with me. All right, even though I was in a very, how shall I say, adversarial mode. Hey, Shrapnel. But one of the things that she tried to point out was that these studies all prove, you give money to these schools and it helps out the outcomes. And I said, bull crap. Because I know what bull crap is. I said, show me a study that was done long term that demonstrates that these programs that you're talking about actually work. That's not showing me a program that is from this school district versus that school district. I want to see the study where this was the result prior to this and this was the result after the fact. Okay? That's what I want to see. Show me, demonstrate to me that when a school district implements program XYZ, don't care what the program is there, that the outcome for the students becomes better, that the rate of success for the student outcome becomes higher as a result. You don't see that. You don't see that in these things. So the first study that the person tried to give to me was exactly what I pointed out. They were trying to compare this school to that school. I don't want to see that. Because there's no such thing as like districts. A school district today here in Arizona, okay, is not going to be like a school district in Massachusetts. And there's a reason I'm talking about Massachusetts. I'll be right back to you with that. You're not going to sit up there and see a demographic in Omaha, Nebraska, all right, that's going to be similar, all right, to Atlanta, Georgia, all right, or Savannah, Georgia, or Dallas, Texas, or Los Angeles for that matter. You're talking a whole slew of differences. But if you show me a program that you put in place in LA, and then you also put that same program in place in Texas, and the results for the children, notice the words, the result for the collective children shows a higher dynamic result, then I'm willing to look at it. I'm willing to say, hey, let's look at this. Because you're comparing apples to apples then. It doesn't matter where you started A and where you finished B if the results show a consistency of a better rate of passing or a higher rate of success coming from the student body. Howdy, Darkstar. And this person legitimately tried to sit up there and find a study. And what they found was this study right here. Let me get rid of the Batman characteristic here. And let me pop up what I'm referring to here. The study is long-term effects of universal preschool in Boston. Okay. And if you look through the study, it mentions, well, there are some schools and so forth, and there have been large study programs. Evidence from large study programs are more mixed. Non-experimental studies of the federal Head Start program find initial test scores. Right here is where it is. All right, I'll highlight it. All right. Gains that subsequently fade out, but positive effects may often appear with long-term outcomes, right? In other words, we're wishful thinking. So what they did is they tried to come back with a randomized trial to avoid having to deal with this situation. All right. To fill in the gap, all right, we're using a lottery-based design to estimate the effects of large-scale public preschool in Boston, Massachusetts on long-term post-secondary education outcomes. Our approach compares the students who were randomly lotteried. Okay, right there is a flawed comparable philosophy, folks. Right there, you're already avoiding a problem in an attempt to prove that you're going to get the outcomes that you want. No, man. No, man. What could you be saying here? What could you be saying? Okay. Here's the problem with trying to utilize this methodology. You are removing the likeness of the upbringing of the child. In other words, you're comparing people that have a different upbringing more often than you are the same one. Well, it's randomized. No matter, it's randomized. No, the students are randomized. In other words, the student is just, they got a list of students, and then they say, okay, this student, we're going to pick this student that was randomized going to us, and then we're going to say, did they go to preschool or didn't they go to preschool? And then we're going to follow them through the results. The problem with that selective process is that student that went to preschool versus the one that didn't go to preschool, why did the one go to preschool and the other one didn't? The main reason people go to preschool or students are put in preschool is because their parents care enough to put them into preschool. Parents that don't care about their child don't put them into preschool. So to say that the reason the child achieves later on in life is due to the fact that they attended preschool and that the program itself functions and works. And I'm not against this, by the way. I'm not against spending money on preschool. But to say that program works because of that is just absolute shite. It's trying to parse the data to avoid a negative outcome. The data should be able to speak for itself. You should be able to go to a school, whatever that school is, prior to their having a preschool, introduce a preschool, and then compare what the data was from before the preschool to after the preschool. They didn't do that. This is not rocket science. And it's a bugaboo of mine. And it's a bugaboo of mine from the military. Believe it or not, it goes all the way back to the military where I saw what these friggin' clowns do, all right, when they're trying to parse data to get outcomes they want. Specifically when you're talking about things like readiness and how this group of soldiers, you don't count them into the data because of XYZ. They're new to the unit. They were gone for a certain period of time. They've only been with the unit for 3 months. Blah, blah, blah. I'm talking about state juvenile facilities. It's my Friday. Time to badge in. That's the rest of the show in the morning. Good luck to you, Darkstorm. But my real problem is throwing money after bad money. If you're going to sit up there and demonstrate to me that we're going to put a program in and all of a sudden it's going to have a better outcome, I'm all for it. If you can prove that it works, I'm even all for playing, let's see if it works. Let's put a program in place to see if it works. Believe it or not, I'm all for that. And if it works, I believe in continuing the program. But there are problems nowadays because society changes around it. So any kind of long-term usage for any of this stuff is already limited in usefulness to begin with. If you don't understand what I'm talking about like food. Having food programs in schools. What have they done with food programs in schools? Are they working the way they were before, back in the 1960s, 1970s? Or is the outcomes now been virtually useless now? And I'm not for getting rid of freaking food in public schools. Okay, I'm just trying to point out a factor that's not accounted for and nobody even wants to look at. And I'm sick and freaking tired of this bullshit from these unions, all right, who they don't give a shit about these students, claiming that they do, claiming that they want better outcomes, all right, and doing absolute nothing, all right, to actually see that achieved. And then sit up and say, well, we need more money. We need more money. Red for ed. We're going to go on strike. If it was up to me and I was the superintendent of schools, the very first time that these jackasses went on strike, I'd have said, that's fine and dandy. You're all gone. I would sit up there and immediately say, anybody who wants to teach our kids, close the schools. We're going to sit up there and do a new hiring process. Every freaking teacher will have to sit up there and reapply to see whether or not they're going to be allowed in that school. And if they're on strike, they can remain on strike for as long as they want until we get these schools up and running. And I would change the dynamics that we're using to hire teachers who damn right care, and not these assholes who walk around constantly, okay, guys, we really care about this, that we're looking at this, because their outcomes don't result in better outcomes for the students. Oh, you can talk about this specific student or that specific student all you want. I'm not looking for individual outcomes. I want a basis or a broad-based collective outcome. Because that's what these damn things were designed for. That's where a lot of this problem is. You got a lot of stupid programs out there. Oh, we're going to have queer story time, where we're going to invite some jackass from some LGBTQ LMNOP freaking rainbow crap, and you know what you end up getting? What you really end up getting, or seem to always be getting constantly, right, is this. Every friggin' time. We want to teach this. We want to teach degeneracy to kids. We can't stop our degeneracy. These people prioritize degeneracy. You had a guy in Illinois, an Illinois state senator, read from a book to their speaker who just passed. You can't sit up there and ban books out of these schools. All he did was at this public reading of adults, read from this book, and then start screaming, I feel uncomfortable with what you're doing. I feel uncomfortable. But it's okay for kids to be perusing this kind of crap, right? It's okay for money to be wasted in this manner. There's a constant load of crap that keeps coming again and again and again. And then you end up with the shakedown artists. Like I said, I'm yelling at clouds today. Apple disputes French finding that says the iPhone 12 meets radiation rules. From Paris, from Reuters. Apple defended its iPhone 12 on Wednesday after the French watchdog ordered it a halt to its sales, citing that breaches of the European Union radiation exposure limits. Radiation. The French move raised the prospect of further bans in Europe. Germany's network regulator, Biznata, said that it might launch similar proceedings and was in close contact with French authorities, while Spain's OCU Consumers Group urged authorities to halt the sales of iPhone 12s. Because it's radioactive, folks! It's radioactive! It's not radioactive. Okay? And that's not the kind of radiation that they're talking about. They're talking about RF, radio frequencies, which are non-ionizing in range. What is an ionizing? How do you define something that's been ionized? Who knows? Who out there knows? I do. When you ionize something, you create ions. What does it take to create an ion? I can hear people asking, well, how's an ion created? Glad you didn't ask, because I was going to give it to you anyway. An ion is created when you remove an electron completely out of its shell, all right, or molecular shell or orbital shell. So it becomes charged. The atom then takes on a charge of some sort. This is a bit different than moving from one energy shell to another energy shell. When you completely free an electron, you kick the electron free from the molecular orbit that it was in before, or the atomic orbit that it was in before, or the atomic, I shouldn't say orbit because that's not an accurate assessment, right? From the atom itself, the atom becomes charged. And so what it does is it will look for an atom to steal. It will look, not for an atom, excuse me, it will look for an electron to steal from somewhere else in order to become electrically neutral. Okay? This can happen with higher energy fields, But it doesn't really happen with RF. That's not saying RF is not problematic. Okay? The problem is the what people are saying here has to do going on further with this test. Apple said in a statement that the iPhone 12 launched in 2020 was certified by multiple international bodies as compliant with the global radiation standards. It had provided several Apple and third-party lab results proving that the company's compliance to the French agency and that it was contesting its findings. Researchers have conducted a vast number of studies over the last 2 decades to assess health risks resulting from mobile phones. According to the WHO, and yes, I am already rolling my eyes. All right, no adverse health effects have so far been established as being caused by mobile cell phone use. France's Agency Nationale du whatever, all right, told Apple on Tuesday to halt iPhone 12 sales in France after tests that it said showed the phone's specific absorption rate, a gauge of the rate of radio frequency energy absorbed by the body from a piece of equipment, was higher than legally allowed. Okay? Hello, Lou. Also, the dangerous stuff from nukes is physical granules that emit radiation. It's like super potent asbestos as far as dealing with. Okay, asbestos has a different effect on human tissue, specifically lung tissue, where what it does. Okay, why is asbestos dangerous in the lungs? It has to do with the lung itself, lung tissue itself. Lung tissue is very robust. All right, and it is constantly being renewed by the body. Asbestos interferes with that process in multiple ways. Okay, I'm not going to go into it, but that's one of the reasons why it is a carcinogen especially when dealing with the lungs. It's not just a carcinogen for the lungs, but you're going to encounter it more in the lungs, and the lungs become more susceptible to uh, asbestos as a carcinogenic. Okay? Radiation has an ionizing effect, which I was describing to everybody. Okay? When you're talking about radioactive substances, okay, a radioactive substance is having a disintegration. The disintegration can come in the form of gamma, alpha, and beta production. And I'm not going to go, there are subsets in those, and I'm not going to go into them. Okay? The most ionizing of all the radiation are alpha particles. Alpha particles are also the easiest to shield from, but radiobiologically, the effect on the body is actually higher, all right, when hit with alpha particles. Why? Because of the amount of ionizing effect that it has within the body's tissue. A gamma ray, for example, can ionize. However, most of the time, a photon generated in the gamma ray at the gamma ray energy level will generally pass completely through the body without interacting at all with any tissue. The vast majority of gamma rays go through the body, all right, without affecting anything. That's not saying that gamma radiation isn't dangerous. Okay? I'm just pointing out that on a single photon of that radiation, the effect will be negligible generally because it goes right through the body. An alpha particle will be absorbed in your tissue, but and will not exit. Well, will come in one side and will not exit the other side. It won't. Its energy is going to be absorbed by the body somewhere within that energy. its entire energy is going to be absorbed by the body. It's not going to radiate out the other side. Okay, and yes, I'm using the problem has to do with medical terms, Lou. All right, when you're talking about gamma rays, right? If you're talking about gamma, I'm talking about gamma in a spectrum on an energy on a frequency spectrum of radio radiomagnetic electromagnetic waves. Okay, propagation. That's a bit differentiated from several other things, but I'm not going to go into that. I'm not going to confuse things more. Electrons will generally, no matter what the energy levels are, also will generally be stopped somewhere within the body. Okay. Now, how does this affect things? Well, first of all, that's not what you're talking about from your cell phone. Your cell phone is not radioactive. Okay. It's not generating high enough radio frequencies, energies, all right, to become ionizing radiation. That's not to say that it doesn't have an effect on the body, though. And this is something that there's been a lot of discussion about. Because nobody really knows what the point is to where the damage done to the body, not from ionizing radiation, just from the heating aspect of radiation. Not, just bear with me. From a radio frequency has an effect. We do know that even when you're not dealing with ionizing radiation, that it will have a negative effect on the human body. There are certain areas where you will see definite deterioration if exposed long enough to radio frequencies. The eyes are one of them. Glaucoma is one of them. But you're not seeing this. So here's the problem. As they're saying that the specific absorption rate, a gauge, a rate of is higher than what's legally allowed. Okay, first question, what did you use to measure this? This goes back to the same question I was bitching about before. What are the French using that's different, right, than what these other guys are saying to measure specific absorption rate? And why should we be using the French's methodology for determining absorption rate versus anyone else? Because that's what you're getting ready to argue here. That's what this is going to all be about. How did you determine what this rate was? What did you use? All right? Because I guarantee you what's happening is you got one group using one set of methodology and another group saying another methodology, and they're both going to start arguing about whose is better. See, right here, Croft says that the French findings could differ from those recorded by other regulators because the ANFR assesses radiation with a method that assumes direct skin contact without intermediate textile layers between the device and the user. So in other words, they're saying, well, you have to put the phone directly on the human skin. The French government source also said that the French test was different from the method used by Apple. So in other words, you're testing Apple. What you're looking at are results from apples and oranges comparisons. No, I don't care about Apple being told that they can't sell the iPhones well. Don't care at all. I'll be perfectly frank with you. Don't care. But it's this kind of bullshit, and we know what the reason the French are doing this for. Let's be perfectly frank here. Why is the French government making this claim? McFly, why are they making this claim? Money. Money. This is all about money. They want more money. They want to shake down Apple to get more money. That's what this is about. It's a shakedown. And if they're successful in shaking down the Apple, okay, they'll start to apply. They'll just continue on. They're going to continue no matter what anybody says. They are going to continue. These guys are shakedown artists. That's all they are. It's the government trying to get money from people. And I'm freaking frankly sick of it. Is it the United States? No, but I guarantee you that there are states in the United States today. There are leftist states, New York, California, right? Guaranteed you, right now they're watching this, and if France succeeds, they're going to sit up there and make the same claims, and they're going to sit up there and try and, well, fine Apple for not meeting whatever regulations that they can come up with. That's exactly what this is about. Don't really care who wins this, to be honest. As far as Apple goes, couldn't happen to a nicer company. Can't stand Apple anyway. But that's the problem with this crap, folks. But back to Twitter. There there is a Cernovich decided to host the new darling of everyone. All right, the guy who wrote the Rich Man and with Rich Men North of Richmond, right? And he is now the darling of the anti-establishment set and so forth. And he got in a little tiff with Cernovich because Cernovich wanted him to come sing at some venue, but they want to charge $200 a person. And he's saying no. I'm not. I don't want to sit up there and do this concert for 200. I want something around $25 a person. Blah blah blah. No, I don't have a dog in this fight because I don't care. I personally think that the song is okay. It's a great anthem if you want to talk about it from that standpoint. But the guy who wrote it and his singing is not my cup of tea. I don't like his voice, to be honest. It's okay. It's not horrific. But it ain't no melodious sound that you enjoy listening to. He's no Barry White. He's no Paul McCartney. If you understand my point. That's not to degrade the song or degrade the guy's songwriting or anything else. It's just not my cup of tea. So I don't really care what he charges. All right? I really don't. If he wants to get into a tiff for Cernovich, fine. The problem that I had was when Cernovich was saying, well, we did a venue where we did something similar, having some kind of hosting cigar parties, and the venues cost us so much money that they were charging $100 per person, all right, just to go to this cigar party to break even. Okay, if you want to have a cigar party, once again, don't care, don't smoke cigars, not going to a cigar party, right? But there are other venues. If that's what your venue's costing, look for another damn venue if that's what the problem is. You guys are making mountains out of freaking molehills is my point. Yes, there's going to be overhead no matter what venue you choose. There's going to be overhead, but I guarantee you don't need to be charging $100 a per person ticket for it just to break even. Now maybe you do in places like LA, and maybe you do in places like Richmond or DC or whatever, in some of these huge freaking cities. But I guarantee you, even in those cities, you can find a venue. If nothing else, do it in a fucking state park. Pardon my language. There are problems that when we talk about things and about money. Right now, we're getting ready to hit a debt limit. Okay? And personally, there's a way I would sit up there and handle this that nobody's looking at. You want to stop the debt limit? It's very simple. You just sit up there and say, hey, you've had enough money. Well, we need more money to keep the federal government. No, you don't need more money to keep the federal government. The federal government can go along fine. Now, there are workers within the federal government that you can't keep paying. But overall, the federal government will go along fine. Once it hits that debt limit, boom. Don't sit up there and put any more debt. Say, okay, this is the debt as far as it's going to go, and all you can use is the revenue coming in. I guarantee you, all right, the economy won't suffer. Guarantee it. How do you know, Nomad? How do you know? How can you make that kind of guarantee? It's real simple, folks. Because the federal government is the one causing most of the problems. Okay? They're the ones causing the problems in the economy. They're not the solution. They're the problem. You get them out of the way by preventing them from getting in the way to begin with, because you're not paying a bunch of jackass regulators to spend you into oblivion. And guess what your freaking economy will do? It will friggin' take off. Folks, they just did a study. The federal government just did a study. They did a little survey. They did a little survey of their workers in the EPA. And 80% of the workers in the EPA were like, I want to go back to the office to work. And I said, great. We got 80% of the EPA that needs to find real jobs. They don't need to be working, all right, on my paycheck. That's 80% of the people that don't need to freaking be working for the federal government right then and there. You don't want to go back to work because that means working in an office? Fine. Close the office and fire all those workers. Fire them. And they're not the only ones. There's a whole slew of waste and mismanagement of people that don't need jobs there in the federal government. And don't get me wrong, will there be cracks that have to be filled in certain areas? Yes. But the vast majority of the people don't need to be working in the federal government. They don't need to be in the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy as a whole could be cut by 70%. And if you don't believe me that there's a lot of overhead in a lot of these damn companies, all you got to do is look at Twitter. Twitter has not crashed. Twitter has not gone extinct. They fired 90% of the staff. I don't want you to think on that. 90% of the people that were working in Twitter are no longer working in Twitter, and yet they're still running fine and have been. They're still able to come out with new features. Now, they might not be the features I want, but they come out with new features. What I was doing before is not impacted in the slightest. I'm not saying everything is golden on Twitter. I'm just saying that in order to put out that product runs fine for all intents and purposes, runs fine without all that freaking overhead. Imagine that. And if you think that the federal government is oh, no. Those workers there, their workers there is a lot more important. Bull crap. Get rid of them. Now. This is why I keep coming back to trying to explain to people who don't understand civics lessons about the Constitution. What does the Constitution say and the Constitution doesn't say, right? Like the jackass who stood up there and just said, well, this woman in New Mexico, she doesn't have the right as the governor to sit there and declare an emergency and ban guns. Don't get me wrong. She shouldn't have done it. But I will say, there's nothing that she's not violating the Constitution per se, all right, with her rights, with what she did. Is she abusing her power? Is she abusing her authority? Oh, hell yes. Should she be impeached and removed from office? Damn Skippy. Is she, however, violating the Constitution? Now, I would say she's violating the Second Amendment. Yes. I would also sit up there and point out that her stated reasoning doesn't hold water. Oh, I'm doing it for a health emergency. What health emergency? Well, we're trying to protect children. Okay, so the criminal's going to stop bringing guns? Well, no, the criminals will still bring guns. So this 11-year-old, was she shot by a criminal, or was she shot by just a guy who accidentally discharged the weapon? Yes, the Emergency Powers Acts do exist in the various states. And yes, they can suspend habeas corpus. Those are your freaking civil rights, folks, for those who don't know what I'm talking about. And it is legal until it's declared illegal by a court somewhere. Which always happens, by the way. Normally after the fact. Normally long after the fact. The courts never want to decide whether or not something's freaking legal or illegal, right, until after the fact, generally. Now, in this case, the federal court has stepped in and said what she's doing is wrong and has vacated it. She's vacated her order. And I'm not sure that I agree with that or not. Aside from the fact that what she's doing won't help anything and that it's a freaking political stunt. See, this is the difference between a political stunt, by the way. For all you freaking leftist fools out there, notice the difference between a stunt that accomplishes absolutely nothing, has no effect on what's going on, and what the quote-unquote stunt that you called, right, taking the illegals and saying, here's your free ticket to your sanctuary city of choice. What the effect has been there. That stunt has gotten the result exactly as expected. You don't hear them calling it a stunt anymore, are you? You don't hear Mayor Adams coming out and going, oh, that's just a stunt. That's not going to have any effect whatsoever. Having an effect now, isn't it, asshole? Hey, jackass. Hey, jackass in Chicago. Having an effect there now, too, isn't it? Guess it wasn't so much of a friggin' stunt, was it, Mr. Newsom? Where you're like, you can't do that. You can't get sent to California. I'm gonna sue. I'm gonna stick my AG on you. I'm gonna stick the Attorney General on you. I'm gonna stick him on you. If you come here, we're gonna arrest you. We're gonna arrest you because you're committing crime. By giving you exactly what you demanded everyone else sit up there and have. You demanded that this was okay. In fact, you sit up there and went out of your way to say you would welcome them all in there. Bitch ain't going doing it now, is he? This is an ad hoc rant for those who didn't know. I was going to yell at clouds. now you know what I meant by that. So much for the stunt. Now, I've talked about a few things, but there's one more thing I want to talk about. And that is the COVID. And no, I'm not afraid to say it. I'm just going to point out some facts. These are facts from the CDC. Okay? The CDC stated that the effectiveness of booster number 4 for COVID was nowhere near what the quote-unquote initial effectiveness was of the frickin' first shot. They also said that the longevity of effectiveness was less than a month. The CDC has said this about the 4th booster shot. Okay. CDC has admitted this. Took them a long time. Government took a long time for the government to actually admit this stuff. Oh yeah, immigration has gone so far, too far. Every single one has to go, papers or not. By the way, a judge sit up there and just declared DACA illegal, and I got to ask, well, what should we do with these guys that came here as children? You know what? There's an embassy right there from your country. Here you go. Don't come out, or we'll arrest you for being here in this country illegally, and we'll deport you right back over to the embassy. That's exactly what I do. I start filling these embassies up. Even if I have to temporarily give them extra space and sit up there and give them freaking tents to sit up there and house them in, I would send them all to their embassies. These are your citizens. Deal with them. Accept them. But that's just me. That's immigration. Back to COVID. I keep asking the same question. You just put out, well, we want this booster shot. Get your booster shot. Okay. You want me to get a booster shot. How effective is it? I'm just asking a question. I want them to tell me how effective this booster shot is. I want a comparative system of knowing how effective is this booster shot. Is it too much to ask how effective is this booster shot? Is it going to actually protect me? And for how long? For how long can I expect this booster shot to protect me from the new strains of COVID? Can somebody tell me what that is? Anyone? Because I don't see any information being put out by the FDA or the CDC or anyone else with claims about how effective this shot is against this new strain or this strain of COVID that everyone seems to be worried about. I see people going, well, we need a mask. We need a mask again. We're going to start masking up. And we need to start closing schools. And we need to start masking schools. When there's literally no study that shows that had any effect whatsoever. When no one can prove that there was any effect, positive or negative wise, to masking. Yet we keep getting told we need to start going back to this. Okay, well, show me the evidence that this works. That's all I'm asking for. I don't think I'm asking for too much. I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to put out propaganda that it doesn't work or anything else. I'm just asking, show me the information that it works. That's all. It might. Show it to me. You've had plenty of time to study this now. You got plenty of data. The CDC has been collecting data on this damn thing for the past 4 freaking years. How about you show us the damn data? That's all I'm asking. I want a little transparency here. Why is this so damn difficult? Why is this such a hard ask? You say that it's effective. You say that it's this. Okay, I don't want to hear if this is effective or that effective. I don't want buzzwords. I want actual information that I can look up and say, okay, I can compare this so that I can see how effective this is going to be so I can make a rational choice about whether or not, yeah, I really need to get this shot or not. Now, I'll be honest with you. I have my doubts. Just like the flu shot, where, well, we're putting a flu shot out there, but in reality, we're guessing what the flu strain is that might be effective. This might be effective against, and we're hoping that it's effective. Show me the data where flu shots year by year have created a dynamic where overall, all right, flu's gone down as a result of people getting the flu shot. I'm not asking for the moon here. I'm really not. I'm just asking you for some common sense. Show me the data. Believe it or not, I'm given information. I can make rational decisions for myself given the correct information, given the information in a rational and effective manner. Now, I will admit this in all fairness. I have not gotten the COVID shot. I didn't get the booster. I didn't get the original. And there are reasons that I determined that I didn't want to get this. All right. And it has to do with being within this industry to an extent, within the healthcare industry, and reading my data on this prior to even COVID being announced as a problem. I was taking a wait and see approach. And yes, I will fully admit I was making a decision about my health and I was risking my health as a result. No, I honestly believe that I probably did get COVID at some point. Not because I tested positive, because I've never tested positive for COVID, but because I had certain symptoms that I think are COVID related. So, I can hear it now. Well, no, man, do you think you made the right decision then? Overall, I think I made the right decision for myself and for my immediate family. I didn't make the decision for them. All right. But my decision for myself, the fact that I think that I may have had COVID could that have negatively impacted the rest of my family? Well, okay. That is a risk to them, all right, that I was incurring that could have affected them. But I did not sit up there and tell them, hey, don't get this shot, or hey, go get this shot. I gave them my opinion about why I wasn't getting the shot, and that is it. And I let them talk to the medical doctors, and just like I did, all right, to make their own determination. And they're free to do what they want. They're adults. All right. Natural immunity was found to be superior than the jab. No. I'm going to disagree with you there, Tia. Why am I saying that? Because we haven't seen any data on that either. I'm not going to say that natural immunity is superior, right, when there's no data showing that either. I'm not saying that it isn't either, though. Understand? I'm just not trying to sit up there and say, when in the absence of data, I'm not going to sit up there and tell you that there's data out there that supports XYZ when I don't have any friggin' data to reference. Whether it supports XYZ or not, all right, if I don't have the data, why would I make that assumption? I am not here to bleed on my about my feelings. I feel this way, so this way it should be, and that's what go pound sand. I'm not talking about you, TM. I'm not this saying that. I'm just talking about this general attitude of people who want to run around with their freaking hearts on their sleeves about how they feel about this or feel about that without freaking thinking about it. And I can hear people right now. Well, when the COVID stuff hit, it was so fast that we had to take the risk. We had to go right then and there. We didn't have the evidence, so we had to move real quick. Did we? Can somebody show me with all the things that we put in place, did it stop the spread around the country? Did it stop the amount of people who caught it and the severity of it? I would like to see the data on that. But what if there was more viral? What if it was worse? I mean, it could have you were running a risk. Okay. Here's my issue with this, all right? And I'll explain this to people who understand it. Okay? When a disease is being spread, whatever the vector, okay, airborne is the one everyone worries about. But when a disease is being spread, the first thing that happens is when a person first becomes infected is they're asymptomatic for a period of time. Might be 2 minutes, might be 20 minutes, might be 25 days, might be even longer, where they are asymptomatic. Now, when they're asymptomatic, they may or may not be able to spread the disease. This is something else that most people don't understand. If a person is asymptomatic, can they spread the disease? This is the first question that needed to be answered. With COVID, the answer to that is, quite frankly, yes. Somebody that is asymptomatic can spread COVID. Okay? Now, we don't know the gestation period of that asymptomatic aspect of it, but we do know that people who aren't showing signs can spread it to somebody else. Then they can start showing signs, and the person that they spread it to can start showing signs. Okay? That's called gestation period. It has a gestation period. And the gestation period is not going to be the same for every individual because everybody's individual immune system is less or more susceptible than the person next to them to that specific disease. There are people who are not susceptible to some diseases who are highly susceptible to other diseases, and vice versa. So that's the second part. Now, in order to whatever vector you're talking about for the spread of the disease, in order for it to spread widely, you need to have an asymptomatic gestation period that is somewhat significant for how the vector spreads. For example, if it's spread from person to personal contact, direct physical contact, all right, that vectoring is a lot different than vectoring from spread via an airborne spread. Okay? Now, with COVID, one of the things that I think has been proven out, borne out, is that it is spread both by touch and airborne. Okay? You can spread it by touching people, you can spread it by touching something that was infected, or you can spread it by aerosolizing it through the air. Okay? That's the way it is. Now, why am I bringing all this up? And people are like, "What are you talking about, no man? You're not staying on target. You're not staying." I'm staying on target because of this. Okay, for a disease like COVID, COVID can spread, but was COVID really deadly? Were people dying of COVID in mass? Quite frankly, we don't know. Why? Because once again, the data showing people that died from COVID versus data showing people who died but also tested positive for COVID have been so freaking jumbled up that we don't know what to freaking believe. We don't know how deadly this disease ever really was. And I do believe that the disease could kill. I do believe that there's people who died of COVID. I just don't know what the number is. And I definitely don't know, if I don't know what that number is, I definitely don't know whether or not someone who died with COVID, whether or not it played a significant role in that person's demise. We don't know that information because it wasn't ever tabulated. Even though they said they were doing it, it wasn't. And then that data has never been released to the public. So we don't know. We do know that there were decisions made by the government, both state and federal, that both helped/hurt people with COVID. What they did to the nursing homes in New York, for example, was a freaking crime where you basically infected people with the disease who were the most vulnerable from the actions that they took. And I think people need to be held accountable for that. And people should be going to jail for that. And I'm sorry, but they haven't been held accountable. They're not in jail. They haven't been sued into frickin' the poorhouse like some of them should be. Fredo and his brother come to mind. But I will also say this. Did we need to close schools? Did we need to mask in schools? Did we need to go to this whole remote learning route? I don't think that we did. At least the data is not being demonstrated to me or anyone else that had any positive effect on this. Once again, I'm not arguing about how deadly the disease was or wasn't. I just want information, and I'm not being provided it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with asking for that information to make a better friggin' decision. All right, I've ranted on now for a good pontificated for a good hour. I think that this was just an off the cuff rant because I felt like ranting and yelling at clouds. Hope that you all have a good day. Appreciate y'all coming out. Thanks a lot, guys. And I'll talk to y'all later. Bye bye.